I still remember the moment everything changed. I was sitting in my home office, the hum of the ceiling fan barely breaking the heavy silence. The late afternoon sun filtered through the blinds, casting striped shadows across the desk where I was supposed to be working. Instead, I was scrolling through my phone, a habit I had picked up during the long hours my wife, Lisa, was out with friends. I thought nothing of it at first. It was just another day in what I believed was a stable marriage. But then I stumbled upon a message that made my heart drop. I had been curious about her late nights, the way she would come home with a hint of perfume that wasn't hers. I had brushed those thoughts aside, attributing them to my overactive imagination. Yet, as I read those texts between Lisa and the private investigator, Jake, I felt like the ground beneath me was crumbling away. "I can't wait to see you tonight," one message read, followed by a string of heart emojis that felt like daggers to my chest. My mind raced. Jake was supposed to be helping us, helping me figure out if. My suspicions about Lisa were unfounded. I had hired him to uncover the truth, to shed light on what I thought was just paranoia. Instead, he had become a part of the very betrayal I was trying to expose. I felt sick, my stomach twisting in knots as anger surged through my veins. This was not just infidelity, it was a collusion, a conspiracy against the trust I had placed in both of them. As I sat there staring at the screen, a whirlwind of emotions crashed over me: betrayal, rage, disbelief. How could she do this? How could he? The betrayal felt like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. I thought about our life together, the dreams we had woven into the fabric of our marriage. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of sorrow and fury, each wave threatening to pull me under. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I had always prided myself on being level-headed, on facing challenges with a rational mind. But this was different. This was personal. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks, my pulse quickening as I fought against the urge to scream. Instead, I closed my eyes and pictured their faces: Lisa, with her soft smile that had once filled me with warmth, and Jake, the man I had trusted to help me, now reduced to a traitor in my eyes. I needed to think clearly. I reached for my notebook, the one I used for work, and flipped to a blank page. I needed to write down everything I was feeling, to make sense of the chaos swirling in my mind. I scrawled the words betrayal and revenge on the top of the page, underlining them fiercely. The anger that bubbled within me began to take shape, morphing into something I could channel. I wasn't going to let this go unanswered. I thought about what Jake had done. He had crossed a line, not just as a private investigator, but as a man. I imagined him sitting in his office, laughing with Lisa, sharing intimate moments that should have belonged to us. He didn't just take my wife. He took my trust, my faith in people. I could feel the gears turning in my mind as I plotted my course of action. What if I turned the tables? What if I could ruin him the way he had ruined me? I had a plan forming, a way to reclaim my dignity and make him pay for his betrayal. I would make sure he lost every client, every ounce of credibility he had built up. I would expose him for the fraud he truly was. With renewed determination, I began to outline my strategy. I would gather evidence of his unprofessional conduct, the way he had crossed ethical lines by engaging with my wife. I would talk to his clients, warn them of his indiscretions. I would ensure that everyone knew the truth about Jake the investigator, the man who couldn't be trusted with anyone's secrets. I felt a dark satisfaction wash over me. I knew this wasn't just about revenge. It was about taking back control. I was no longer the victim in this story. I was the one writing the next chapter, and it was going to be one hell of a plot twist. As the days passed, I became consumed by my plan. Each morning, I would wake up before the sun, my mind racing with ideas for how to dismantle Jake's little empire. I had once thought of him as a necessary ally, but now he was the enemy I needed to expose. The more I thought about it, the clearer my objective became. I wanted Jake to feel the same betrayal I felt, the same gut-wrenching pain. I started by gathering evidence. I knew I had to be meticulous. I couldn't afford any mistakes. I pulled out my laptop and began documenting everything. I went back through the messages I had found, taking screenshots of their exchanges. Each "I miss you" and "can't wait for tonight" felt like a victory, a piece of ammunition I could use against him. I made sure to save the timestamps, too. Timing was crucial. I needed to show just how long this affair had been going on. Next, I decided to do a little digging into Jake's business. I had no experience in this realm, but I was determined. I learned that he ran a small private investigation firm, mostly catering to couples who suspected infidelity. It was ironic, really. He had built a career on trust and discretion, and yet here he was, betraying his own clients. I found his business website and noted down the testimonials, the glowing reviews that painted him as a reliable professional. It was time to turn those reviews upside down. I began to think about the clients he had worked with, the people who had trusted him to keep their secrets safe. I needed to find a way to reach out to them, to warn them about the man who had betrayed my trust so easily. I also considered contacting potential clients, those who might be looking for an investigator. I could poison the well before they even reached out to him. The first step was to create a fake persona. I crafted an identity for myself, a potential client who had some suspicions about their partner. I reached out to Jake's office, posing as Mark, a concerned husband who needed help. I wanted to see how he operated, to understand what made him tick. The call was straightforward. I feigned anxiety, speaking about my wife's late nights and strange behavior. Jake was charming, professional, and oh so comforting. He promised to help me to uncover the truth. I felt a surge of anger as I listened to him. How could he so easily play the role of the savior while simultaneously betraying me? After the call, I felt a sense of clarity. I realized that I needed more than just evidence. I needed to gather testimonials from other clients who might have had similar experiences. I started researching online forums and social media groups dedicated to infidelity. There, I found a community of people who shared their stories, their struggles with trust. It was a goldmine. I reached out to several individuals, posing as someone who was looking for advice. I shared my fabricated story, and to my surprise, many responded. They recounted their own experiences with Jake, detailing how he had been unprofessional, how he had crossed lines that should never have been crossed. I documented their stories carefully, ensuring I had their permission to share their experiences if necessary. As I gathered this information, I also began to think about the implications of my actions. Would I feel satisfied once I brought Jake down? Would it erase the pain Lisa had caused me? I wrestled with these questions, but each time I thought about her, about the betrayal, my resolve strengthened. I couldn't let this go unpunished. I needed to take action, not just for myself, but for anyone else who might fall victim to his deceit. I began drafting a letter. This letter would be my weapon. I would send it to every client listed on Jake's website, warning them about his unprofessional conduct and the affair he had with my wife. I wanted them to know that the man they were trusting with their lives was nothing more than a fraud. I poured every ounce of emotion into that letter, detailing my story, my pain, and the evidence I had gathered. I even included the screenshots of the messages, knowing they would hit hard. The more I wrote, the more I felt a sense of empowerment. I was taking control of my narrative, flipping the script on the man who had taken so much from me. Each sentence felt like a step closer to my goal. I made sure to include my contact information, inviting anyone who had experienced similar issues with Jake to reach out to me. I wanted to build a coalition, a group of betrayed clients who could stand together against him. As I prepared to send out my letters, I felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. This was it. I was about to launch my attack. I knew there would be consequences, and I was ready to face them. I had made my choice, and there was no turning back. The night before I planned to send out my letters, I barely slept. My mind raced with thoughts of what might happen next. Would Jake retaliate? Would Lisa confront me? I felt like a soldier preparing for battle, each moment filled with anticipation and dread. I kept replaying the scenarios in my head, envisioning every possible outcome. The thrill of revenge was intoxicating, but so was the fear of the unknown. As dawn broke, I felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through me. I had spent the last few weeks meticulously planning my attack, and now it was time to execute. I brewed a strong cup of coffee, my hands trembling slightly as I printed out the letters. There was something cathartic about seeing my words in black and white, a tangible representation of my anger and hurt. I carefully folded each letter, sealing them in envelopes, and wrote down the names of every client I had discovered. After addressing the envelopes, I took a moment to breathe deeply. I knew I was crossing a line, but I also knew that this wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. I couldn't let Jake continue his deceptive practices without consequences. I gathered my things and set off to the post office, my heart pounding in my chest. As I walked through the door, I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me. The walls felt like they were closing in, and I could practically hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. I approached the counter, trying to appear calm and collected. I handed the envelopes to the postal worker, forcing myself to maintain eye contact. "I need these sent out today," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. Once the letters were sent, I felt a mix of relief and exhilaration. I had taken the first step in my plan, and there was no going back. I returned home, my mind racing with possibilities. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was now in a game, and I was determined to win. In the days that followed, I watched as the fallout began. The first sign came when I received a message from one of the clients I had contacted. "Mark, it. Read, I just received your letter. I had no idea. Thank you for warning me." My heart raced with a mixture of satisfaction and anticipation. I quickly replied, offering to share my evidence and inviting them to join me in holding Jake accountable. One by one, more clients reached out. They shared their own stories of betrayal and unprofessional conduct, and I felt a sense of camaraderie building among us. It was empowering to know that I wasn't alone in this, that others had suffered at the hands of the same man. Each conversation fueled my determination even further, but as the days turned into weeks, I also began to notice something unsettling. Jake's business started to suffer. I saw fewer and fewer glowing reviews on his website, and I learned from my new allies that clients were canceling their appointments. The whispers of his unprofessionalism were spreading, and I felt a sense of vindication wash over me. I had struck a nerve. Then, one evening, as I was scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon a post from Jake. He looked disheveled, his usual confident demeanor replaced by a look of desperation. "To my clients," he wrote, "I'm facing some personal challenges. I assure you that I am still dedicated to providing the best service possible." It was almost comical, the way he tried to maintain an air of professionalism while the walls were crumbling around him. I couldn't help but chuckle to myself. But with this success came a nagging feeling in the back of my mind. I knew I couldn't let up. Jake would eventually retaliate. I was certain of it. He wouldn't take my actions lying down. I found myself constantly checking my phone, waiting for a message or a call from either him or Lisa. I didn't know how she would react once she found out what I was doing. Would she side with him? Would she try to convince me to stop? Those thoughts plagued me as I continued my campaign against Jake. I decided to take it a step further. I reached out to local news outlets, sharing my story and the evidence of Jake's misconduct. I crafted a narrative that painted him not just as a cheating investigator, but as a man who exploited the vulnerabilities of others for his gain. I wanted to ensure that everyone knew the truth about him. As I sent out my press release, I felt a rush of excitement. This was it, the final blow. I was ready to watch Jake's world crumble around him. I knew that the fallout would be significant, but I also knew that I was doing the right thing. I had taken control of my narrative, and I was determined to see it through to the end. The next morning, I woke up to a flurry of notifications on my phone. Local news outlets had picked up my story, and the comments section was alive with discussions about Jake's practices. People were outraged, sharing their own experiences and calling for accountability. I felt a mixture of pride and disbelief. I had sparked a movement, and Jake was at the center of it. But then, just as I was beginning to savor my victory, I received a message from Lisa. "We need to talk," it said. My stomach dropped. I knew this was the moment I had been dreading. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation that was about to unfold. I stared at the message from Lisa, my heart racing and my mind spinning. This was the moment I had anticipated but dreaded all the same. I had been so focused on my revenge against Jake that I had almost forgotten about the other half of this betrayal, the woman I had loved, the woman who had turned my world upside down. I knew I had to face her, but the thought of it filled me with a mix of anger and anxiety. After a few minutes of pacing around my living room, I decided to respond. When and where? I typed, trying to keep my tone neutral, even though my emotions were anything but. I didn't want to show any weakness, not now, not after everything I had been through. She replied almost immediately. Can we meet at the cafe on 5th? I'll be there at 6. I spent the rest of the day in a haze, consumed by thoughts of what I would say to her. Would she try to defend her actions? Would she show any remorse? I felt the weight of my anger pressing down on me, but I also knew I needed to stay calm. I had to be strategic. I had to maintain control of the conversation. When I arrived at the cafe, I took a deep breath before stepping inside. The familiar smell of coffee and pastries enveloped me, but I barely noticed. My eyes scanned the room until I spotted Lisa sitting at a corner table, her fingers nervously tapping against her phone. She looked up as I approached, her expression a mixture of apprehension and defiance. "Thanks for coming," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I slid into the chair across from her, studying her face for any signs of guilt. "I got your message. You said we needed to talk," I replied, keeping my tone even. "I wanted to explain," she said, her eyes darting away from mine. "I didn't think it would come to this." "Explain what?" I leaned in, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. "How you cheated on me with the private investigator I hired. How you betrayed my trust while I was trying to uncover the truth." Her expression shifted, a flicker of regret crossing her features. "I know I messed up, but it's not what you think. Jake, he made me feel special, and I lost sight of what was important." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You lost sight of what was important. You didn't just lose sight, Lisa. You threw it away. You threw me away." "I was confused," she said, her voice trembling. "I didn't know how to talk to you about everything. I thought I could handle it on my own." "Handle what?" "Your loneliness, your infidelity." The words came out sharper than I intended, but I couldn't help it. "You thought cheating with the investigator was the solution." Tears welled in her eyes, and for a moment I felt a pang of sympathy. But then I remembered the betrayal, the way she had laughed and smiled with Jake while I was in the dark. "You know what? I hired him to find out if you were cheating. I found out the truth, and it's worse than I could have imagined." Her eyes widened in shock. "You found out how?" I leaned back in my chair, a rush of satisfaction flooding through me. "I have evidence, Lisa. I've been documenting everything. Your texts, your calls, everything. I've sent letters to his clients warning them about him." "Letters?" She echoed, disbelief etched on her face. "You're trying to ruin him." "I'm trying to expose him for the fraud he is," I shot back. "He deserves every bit of this." Lisa took a deep breath, her composure faltering. "You're not just hurting him, you're hurting me too. This isn't just about him, and you know it." I shook my head. "No, Lisa, you made this about him the moment you chose to betray me. You decided to get involved with someone who was supposed to help us, and now you want to play the victim." "I'm not playing the victim," she insisted, her voice rising. "I'm trying to understand what we had, what we lost. I made a mistake, and I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't cut it," I replied, my voice cold. "You can't just apologize and expect everything to go back to normal. I can't trust you anymore. You've shattered everything we built together." For a moment, silence hung between us like a thick fog. I could see the realization dawning on her face, the weight of her actions finally sinking in. I wanted her to feel the pain. I felt the betrayal that had consumed me. "Are you going to keep this up?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Are you going to ruin his life just because of what happened between us?" I leaned forward, my gaze steady. "He ruined my life when he decided to betray my trust. I'm not going to let him get away with it, and I'm not going to let you off the hook either. You both made choices, and now there are consequences." Lisa looked away, her hands trembling as she wiped away tears. "I never meant for it to go this far," she whispered, her voice cracking. I felt a flicker of something inside me. Was it sympathy or just a desire to see her suffer? I couldn't tell. All I knew was that I was done being the victim. The man I had trusted, the woman I had loved, they had both betrayed me, and I was determined to make them pay. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said finally, my voice low. "I don't know if I even want to try." With that, I stood up, leaving her sitting there, tears streaming down her face. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt a strange mix of triumph and emptiness. I had confronted her, but I hadn't found the closure I had hoped for. The battle was far from over, and I knew that Jake wouldn't take my actions lying down. What would he do next? I had to be prepared. I had become embroiled in a war I hadn't anticipated, and I was determined to come out on top. After my confrontation with Lisa, I felt a storm brewing inside me. I had exposed her betrayal, confronted her about Jake, and yet I was left with a sense of emptiness. I had expected some form of catharsis, but instead, I felt like I was standing on a precipice, looking down into an abyss. I couldn't let myself linger in that darkness. I needed to focus on my plan against Jake. In the days that followed, I gathered more information about Jake's business. I spent hours combing through online reviews and comments, looking for any signs of disgruntled clients. I even began to reach out to some of them directly, sharing my story and the evidence I had collected. It was surprising how many people were willing to listen, willing to share their own experiences of betrayal and unprofessionalism. I also took to social media. I created anonymous accounts on various platforms, warning potential clients about Jake's indiscretions. I shared my story, detailing how he had taken advantage of my trust and turned my life upside down. The response was overwhelming. People began to share my posts, commenting with their own tales of betrayal, and soon it felt like a movement was gaining momentum. But with every victory came a new wave of anxiety. I knew Jake would be watching. He had to be. I imagined him sitting in his office, seething with anger, trying to figure out who was behind the onslaught. I had no doubt he was preparing to retaliate, and I had to be ready for whatever he threw my way. Then one afternoon, as I was sitting in my living room, I received an unexpected call. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something told me it was important. I answered cautiously, my heart racing. "Is this Mark?" a deep voice asked. "Yes, who's this?" I replied, my guard up. "This is Detective Harris. I'm calling about a situation involving Jake Turner." My heart sank. What about him? There have been several complaints filed against him, and we're investigating some serious allegations. I understand you've been in contact with some of his clients. I swallowed hard, the gravity of the situation hitting me. "Yes, I've been warning them about his unprofessional conduct." "Good. We'd like to hear your side of the story. Can you come in for an interview?" I was taken aback. This was unexpected. I had hoped to expose Jake, but I never thought it would escalate to the point of a police investigation. "What kind of allegations?" I asked, trying to maintain my composure. "Fraud, misconduct, and inappropriate relationships with clients. Your testimony could be crucial." I knew this was my chance to bring Jake down once and for all. "I'll come in," I said, my voice steady. The meeting was set for the following day. I spent the night preparing, going over every detail I could remember about Jake's actions. I wanted to make sure I presented my case clearly and convincingly. This was not just about my pain, it was about justice for everyone he had wronged. When I arrived at the police station, I felt a mix of nerves and determination. I was ushered into a small interrogation room, and Detective Harris sat across from me, his demeanor professional yet approachable. "Thank you for coming in," he said, taking notes. "I understand this is a sensitive topic for you." I nodded, my heart racing as I began to recount everything I knew about Jake. I described our initial interactions, how I had hired him to investigate Lisa, and how I had discovered the affair. I shared the evidence I had collected, the messages and the testimonials from other clients who had experienced similar betrayals. Detective Harris listened intently, occasionally asking questions to clarify certain points. The more I spoke, the more empowered I felt. I was no longer just a victim. I was a witness, an advocate for those who had suffered at the hands of a fraud. "Based on what you've shared, we'll be able to take this further," Detective Harris said, his expression serious. "We'll need to gather more evidence, but your testimony is a significant step." As I left the station, a sense of hope filled me. Perhaps this was the turning point I had been waiting for. Maybe, just maybe, Jake would finally face the consequences of his actions. But I also knew that Jake wouldn't go down without a fight. I braced myself for his inevitable retaliation. I had exposed him, and he would retaliate, of that I was certain. That evening, as I sat at home, I heard a knock on the door. My heart raced as I opened it to find Jake standing there, his expression a mix of fury and desperation. "Mark," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "We need to talk." I felt a rush of adrenaline. "What do you want, Jake? You think you can ruin my life like this and get away with it?" He spat. "You have no idea what you're messing with." I crossed my arms, standing my ground. "You brought this on yourself, you betrayed me, and now you're paying the price." He stepped closer, his gaze intense. "You think you're the only one who can play games. I have connections, and I'm not afraid to use them. You don't know who you're dealing with." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Threats won't work on me, Jake. I'm not afraid of you." With that, he turned on his heel and stormed away, leaving me standing in the doorway, my heart racing. I knew this wasn't over. Jake would fight back, and I had to be prepared for whatever he had in store. The days that followed Jake's visit were fraught with tension. I kept my phone close, anticipating a call or a message from him, but it never came. Instead, I found myself looking over my shoulder, feeling the weight of his threats hanging in the air. I knew he wouldn't just let my actions go unpunished. He was a man who thrived on control and manipulation. But I was ready. I had the police investigation on my side, and I had gathered enough evidence to expose him for the fraud he was. I spent my nights reviewing the information I had collected, preparing for the inevitable confrontation that was sure to come. I was determined not to let fear dictate my actions. Then, one evening, as I was sitting at home, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was a news alert. I clicked on it, my heart racing as I read the headline: "Local investigator under investigation for fraud and misconduct." The article detailed the growing number of complaints against Jake, including the allegations of inappropriate relationships with clients. It was a vindication of everything I had worked for, and I felt a surge of triumph. But the article also mentioned that Jake had hired a lawyer and was planning to fight back. My stomach dropped. I knew he wouldn't take this lying down. He would retaliate, and I had to be prepared for the fallout. The next day, I received a call from Detective Harris. "Mark, we have enough evidence to move forward with the investigation," he said. "We're planning to confront Jake soon. We'd like you to be present." I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. This was the moment I had been waiting for, but I also knew that it could escalate quickly. "I'll be there," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The meeting took place in a conference room at the police station, and I was joined by Detective Harris and a few other officers. Jake was brought in, his demeanor a stark contrast to the confident investigator I had once known. He looked disheveled, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for a way out. "Mark," Detective Harris said, "thank you for being here. We're going to ask Jake a few questions regarding the allegations against him." Jake's gaze fell on me, and I could see the fury simmering beneath the surface. "You think you can just drag me in here and ruin my life?" He spat, his voice low and dangerous. "I'm here to tell the truth, Jake," I replied, my voice steady. "You made your choices, and now it's time to face the consequences." The questioning began, and I watched as Detective Harris pressed Jake for answers. He tried to deflect, to downplay the accusations, but the evidence was overwhelming. I could see the walls closing in on him, his bravado slipping away with every question. As the interrogation continued, I felt a sense of satisfaction wash over me. This was the justice I had been fighting for, and I was finally witnessing it unfold. I had taken control of my narrative, and now I was watching Jake's empire crumble. After what felt like hours, Detective Harris concluded the questioning. "Jake, will be pursuing charges based on the evidence we've gathered. You can either cooperate with us or face further consequences." Jake's expression shifted from anger to desperation. "You don't know what you're doing," he said, his voice trembling. "You'll regret this." I stood up, my heart racing. "No, Jake, you're the one who'll regret this. You thought you could play with people's lives and get away with it." As I left the room, I felt a sense of liberation. I had fought back against the betrayal, and I had emerged victorious. But I also knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Jake had made threats, and I had to remain vigilant. In the weeks that followed, I received updates on the investigation. Jake's business was crumbling, and more clients were coming forward with their own stories of betrayal. I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. I had never wanted to see anyone's life destroyed, but I couldn't ignore the damage he had caused. Then, one evening, as I was sitting at home, I received a message from Lisa. "We need to talk." Again, it read. I felt a mix of emotions, anger, betrayal, and perhaps a hint of curiosity. I had spent so long focused on Jake that I hadn't really processed my feelings for Lisa. I decided to meet her. We arranged to meet at the same cafe where we had last spoken. As I walked in, I felt a wave of nostalgia wash over me, but I quickly shook it off. I had come to confront the reality of our relationship, and I wasn't going to let myself get lost in memories. Lisa was already seated, her expression a mix of apprehension and determination. "Mark," she said, her voice steady, "I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened." I took a seat across from her, my arms crossed. "What do you want, Lisa? What's left to say?" "I want to apologize," she said, her eyes searching mine. "I know I hurt you and I can't take that back, but I want to try to make things right." "Make things right?" I echoed, disbelief creeping into my voice. "After everything you've done, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," she said, her voice trembling. "But I've realized how much I took for granted. I want to understand what went wrong between us." I felt the anger rising within me, but there was also a flicker of something else, an old affection perhaps. "You think just saying you're sorry is enough. You broke my trust, and that's not something you can just fix." "I know," she admitted, tears brimming in her eyes. "But I want to try. I want to be better for you and for myself. I'm willing to work on this if you'll let me." I took a deep breath, weighing my options. I had spent so long focused on revenge, on exposing Jake, that I hadn't really considered what I wanted from my own life. Did I want to forgive her? Did I want to try to rebuild? "I don't know if I can," I finally said, my voice low. "You hurt me, Lisa. You shattered everything I believed in." "I understand," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove that I can be better, not just for us but for myself. I want to change." As I looked into her eyes, I saw a glimmer of sincerity. Maybe she was right, maybe there was a path forward, but I also knew it wouldn't be easy. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. "I'll think about it," I said finally, "but I can't promise anything." As I left the cafe, I felt a mixture of hope and uncertainty. The journey ahead would be complicated, but I was ready to face it. I had fought back against the betrayal, and now I had the chance to decide what I wanted for my future. Jake's empire was crumbling, and my life was finally starting to feel like my own again. Whatever happened next, I was determined to forge my path, whether that included forgiveness or moving on completely. The choice was mine, and for the first time in a long time, I felt empowered to take control of my own narrative. And with that thought, I stepped into the world, ready to embrace whatever came next.